And we are going to simplify 2x cubed minus 6x divided by 6x squared. So the first thing that I'm thinking is what makes the denominator 0? Because I'm not allowed to plug in x values that make the denominator 0, because then the whole entire expression will be undefined. So my first question is, what makes the denominator 0? And the way that I can figure that out is by setting it equal to 0, setting the denominator equal to 0. So 6x squared equals 0. You really don't have to solve because you can just see, but I'm going to do it anyway. Divide by 6. You get x squared equals 0. Square root both sides. You get x equals 0. So in this case, what makes the denominator 0? When you plug in 0. That's what makes the denominator 0. So at the very end, I'm going to say, make sure that x does not equal 0. And I'll write that out in a little bit. So that's the first thing. So maybe I'll write that here. X should not equal 0. Otherwise, we get a 0 in the denominator. Then, the next step is going to be factor top and bottom. If possible. So factor the top and bottom if possible. In this case, I can only factor the top. So I'm going to say this becomes, well, you could factor it in your head, but since I'm showing you the notes, I'm going to write it out. I can divide by 2 and an x. Whatever I divide by goes on the outside. So 2x times x minus 3. And I can't factor the bottom, so I'm going to rewrite stuff. 2x, x minus 3. I'm writing it all together now.
Is it not x squared?
No. Oh, this part. Yes, thank you. So, yeah, it should be x squared minus 3. I can't factor this anymore because I can't square root the 3. So it's not a difference of squares. So I just leave that. And then on the bottom, I just have 6x squared. So that's step 2. And then I'm going to reduce or cancel. Reduce or cancel. In this case, I'm really just reducing. 2 over 6, I can divide by 2. And then the x divided by x squared, that just gives me x in the bottom. So I would have x squared minus 3. X divided by x squared is x in the bottom. 2 divided by 6, reducing by 2, that would give me a 3 in the bottom. And I could put a 1 in the top. Remember, it cancels out to 1 if I divide. 2 divided by 2 is 1. But this would be my answer. Also, x should not equal 0. That's all we're doing on this. All we're doing is first figuring out what we're not allowed to plug in the bottom. Then factor the top and bottom if possible. Cancel and reduce. You could write this with parentheses, but since there's nothing on the outside other than 1, You don't have to write it. I'm going to work on example 2, and let's see if we start to get this a little bit easier. There's only going to be 6 problems, and I'll do any of the problems that you want me to do once I give you the assignment. But number 2, where is it? So number 2 will be same instructions, simplify. X squared plus 2x minus 15 over 3x minus 9. I think I'll give you time to try that one on your own. What makes the, I'll say bottom 0? The way you figure that out is just by taking the bottom and setting it equal to 0 and solving. You could factor to solve, but this one's an easy one just to solve straight away. Plus 9, 3x equals 9, divide by 3, x equals 3. So, at the very end, I know I'm going to have to say x cannot, not 0. X is not allowed to equal 3 because we don't want the bottom to equal 0. If x equals 3, then this denominator will become 0, and we don't want that because then we get an undefined term. So, x is not equal to 3. That's the first step. What makes the denominator 0? Second step is to factor top and bottom if possible. So factoring the top, I'm factoring them separately. So I'm doing like 2 separate problems here. When I factor the top, I would have a negative 15 and a positive 2. That would be 5 and 3, except for the 3 is negative. There's no coefficient in front of x squared except for just 1. So I can just write x plus 5, x minus 3. That's the top factored. And then in the bottom, 3x minus 9, I would factor this by dividing by 3. You could also do this in your head. X minus 3. Whatever you divide by goes on the outside. We get an x, we get a minus 3. So, we have this. That's the bottom. And then cancel out or reduce. In this case, we only have things canceling. So our answer is going to be x plus 5 divided by 3. And make sure, because of the original, x does not equal 3. Even though when you plug in 3 here, it doesn't make the denominator 0. When you plug in 3 here, it does. So if we wanted to simplify, if I'm simplifying something, it should give me the same exact values. They should be the same thing, just in a simpler form. So if I'm not allowed to plug in 3 for this, I shouldn't be able to plug it in here, so we have to state that. And then this is the entire answer. X plus 5 divided by 3. This 3 doesn't come from the bottom being 3. It comes from whatever I set this equal to, whenever I set this equal to 0 and solve. So it was a coincidence that it happened to be 3 here. It's the same instructions, I forgot to write it, but simplify. But the first thing that you should do is figure out what makes the bottom 0. I'll give you a couple minutes to try that, and then I'll go from there. So the first question that I'm answering is, what makes bottom 0? Whoops. And the way I can do that is by setting the bottom equal to 0. B cubed, b minus 3. Whenever I have quantity squared, that's the same thing as b minus 3 times b minus 3. So what makes the bottom 0? I can set it equal to 0. But this is already factored. So I can just set each piece equal to 0. Keep doing that. So if I cube root here, we get b equals 0. If I add 3, they both give me positive 3. So I know that at the very end, b will not be able to be 0 or 3 because it'll make the bottom here 0. So I'm not allowed to plug it in here. That should mean I shouldn't be able to plug it in my simplified version. Then I factor, well, this is already factored. I'm going to rewrite it so that I have b minus 3, b cubed, b minus 3, b minus 3. Just write it like that. So it's already factored. You could actually write out b times b times b and then cancel one of them, or you can just use the exponent rules. So with this, there's nothing else to factor, so I would cancel out one of the b minus 3's. And then also deal with b divided by b cubed. That would be, well, if you're dividing variables, you subtract the exponents. This has an exponent of 1, so 3 minus 1 is 2, and the larger exponent is on the bottom, so b squared will be on the bottom, a squared will be on the top, b minus 3 will be on the bottom, and that's it. Just make sure you state your restrictions. B does not equal 0 or 3, because I wasn't allowed to have them in the original, so I shouldn't have them in my simplified version. That's it.